My name is Courtney Colson, a female to female detransitioner, and on this channel we try to figure out what the hell is wrong with me. On this episode, trans medicine is harming trans people. Transgender people have to be the most gullible customers on Earth. They have more blind brand loyalty than fans of Apple products, Stanley Cups, or Labubu dolls, not to timestamp this episode. They clamour and fight for access to hormones and surgeries, but then don't seem to care that they aren't getting the products and services they were promised. Instead of rallying against these opportunistic surgeons, they claim that anyone who is safeguarding them are the ones who are literally killing them. No, we're trying to protect you from yourselves. The trans community should be fighting for better quality healthcare, but they don't. All they're concerned about is complete, unrestricted access to transition, whatever that is. And that might be all well and good if you are true trans, if there is any such thing. But what about the rest of us who are pushed to transition when we aren't transgender? Or maybe we are transgender, but medicalization caused us severe and irreversible harm, the risks of which we weren't made aware of prior to transitioning. The trans community silences any evidence that medical transition is harmful, or that the current system does not work. Instead, they continue to claim that there is a less than 1% rate of regret, and only 1% of trans people will ever detransition. Most people parroting that line don't even know where it came from, but as far as I've been able to tell, it came from a study conducted about 50 or 60 years ago, when the path to transition was completely different to what it is now. And I'll do a full video on statistics at some point later. The trans community does not want to acknowledge the side effects associated with HRT or SRS, and prior to transition, patients are not made aware of any of the risks. The trans community also does not want to acknowledge autoheterosexuality, which, for those of you unaware, is known as autogynephilia for men and autoandrophilia for women. It is a kind of sexual inversion, an attraction to oneself as the opposite sex. Some reduce it to a fetish, but it is more complicated than that, more encompassing than that. The trans community denies its existence because they feel it delegitimizes their image. But if they were honest, then autoheterosexuals such as myself wouldn't get caught up in the crossfire and be convinced to transition in the first place. Instead, the trans community as a whole perpetuates the idea that anyone who says they are trans is definitely trans. Even very small children. Even the mentally ill. As if it were some innate part of their identity and biology, as if it were possible to be born in the wrong body. They also push the idea that medicalization is flawless, life-saving treatment when it is anything but. Now, if you're transgender, and if you've made it this far into the video without closing it or leaving me an angry comment, you have no doubt decided that I am transphobic. And I can tell you I'm anything but. I want trans people to get treatment that actually upholds the Hippocratic Oath, that actually lives up to the standards of modern medicine. We need to be able to have sensible and critical conversations about this subject without threats and histrionics and politics. The truth of the matter is that doctors currently do not provide adequate care for trans people, and that should concern you as a transgender person, just as it's concerned the rest of us for a long time now. What other community would actively silence the harms befalling its own people? Who would ostracize and bully the victims they created? The only other example I can think of are cults and multi-level marketing schemes. Truth does not mind being questioned. A lie does not like being challenged. The behaviors we are seeing from the trans community is analogous to the behaviors displayed by the likes of the Church of Scientology. One is not permitted to ask questions or discuss problems or use evidence-based reasoning. The most terrifying part about the trans movement is that it is completely decentralized as far as I can tell. There is no charismatic leader. There is no church with a physical address. Instead, it is a nebulous and all-pervasive ideology that really only gained the tidal wave momentum it has now in the past decade or so, coincidentally around the same time as the legalization of gay marriage. Pure coincidence. That is a topic for another video, but here we need not concern ourselves with whichever shadowy figures are pulling the strings behind the scenes for their own profit, because it is beside the point. All that matters here is the outcome. The pressure from the trans community to fast-track access to medicalization has harmed everyone, including themselves, especially themselves. The gatekeeper term dates back decades to around the 60s or 70s, coined by impatient, frustrated adult men, to quote Fuse magazine here. Those whom psychiatrists diagnose as true transsexuals would be prescribed hormones by an endocrinologist and must live full-time as women for 2 years, the real-life test as it was called, before the psychiatrist would approve them for gender affirmation surgery. Trans people have to navigate these rigid boundaries and, over time, came to refer to the psychiatrists as gatekeepers. Trans people who did not meet psychiatrist approval were, to an extent, able to exercise agency and find other ways to secure hormones. One interview participant, Jasmine Theodora, remembers that as far back as the 1960s, someone started taking the hormones to get breasts, and then we all started taking them, as in sharing the prescription. She recalls a Dr. Roger Gray who prescribed them without questions, exercising what is known as the informed consent model. In Melbourne, Dr. Harry Imber joined a St Kilda GP clinic in 1972, and by the late 1970s was known in the trans circles for his willingness to prescribe hormones with informed consent. He even wrote about it in the Medical Journal of Australia in 1976. Informed consent. That's all well and good if you are an adult, especially in a time when transsexuality was so rare and access was so limited to medicalization. But what we're seeing now couldn't possibly be regarded as informed consent. One, because most people reporting gender dysphoria are now children and young adults or people with very obvious mental illnesses. And two, doctors are ignorant about trans medicine, even the ones who claim to be specialists. It's because this has all been pushed in the medical community way too fast, way too soon. There has not been enough time to properly educate practitioners. There certainly hasn't been enough time to conduct studies or attempt to replicate the results from those studies. So what you end up with now is a community of doctors who are terrified of any patient who so much as hints at gender dysphoria. They inwardly cower and affirm the dysphoric patient, ignoring their professional instincts. I went to a GP saying I was experiencing gender dysphoria and I wanted to know about transitioning. I wasn't even that keen on it. I just wanted to explore the option. She didn't know anything about it, so she then referred me to an endocrinologist. In order to see the endo, I needed to get a letter from a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And as I've mentioned in previous episodes, the psychiatrist, Gordon Wang, was very dismissive. He advised the endo that although I was likely to detransition, let her do it anyway. Horrifying. The psychologist was a little better. She wanted to see me for more sessions, but she never mentioned I could get those sessions for free through a mental health care plan. So I went to the endocrinologist, Nicole Opie, despite having very flimsy documentation supporting my decision. And you know what she did? Ignored all of that and gave me testosterone in the first or second appointment. She did a hard sell. She made it seem like testosterone would solve all my problems. I hadn't even wanted to transition that badly before. I certainly wasn't suicidal. I didn't feel like I was going to die if I didn't transition. But Dr. Opie made it seem so fun and exciting, and I could quit any time I wanted with no consequences, so why not give it a go? It really aroused my autoandrophilia, which I wasn't aware of at the time. A magical drug that could temporarily turn me into a man? Sign me up. Where was the informed consent there? I might have been 22 years old, but I hadn't done any research because I had gone to Dr. Opie expecting her to have a serious and honest discussion with me about the procedure I was about to undergo. An elective procedure. What I got instead was a snake oil saleswoman. And maybe you're saying, well, not all doctors are like that. Your doctor was clearly breaking the rules. Well, no. I reported her to APRA, the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency. Even though she did break the written laws that I saw, they claimed she'd done nothing wrong. And there was nothing else for me to do other than battling to sue this doctor for the better part of a decade. And you might say, oh, I'm sorry it didn't work for you, but it's life-saving treatment for real transgender people. Cute. What makes you think I'm not transgender? How do you define it? Is it anyone who experiences gender dysphoria? Is it anyone who doesn't conform to gender stereotypes of their natal sex? I am transgender, but I simply treated my gender dysphoria through therapy and cosmetic and lifestyle changes. What we have now is a heavily medicalized, one-size-fits-all treatment pathway. It wasn't like that a decade ago. We used to say there was no wrong way to be trans. It was a personal thing. Then around the time I transitioned, there was suddenly far more pressure to do so medically. And I was an impressionable kid. I fell for it. But let's say you are true trans. You have done all your research, you are happy with your transition. Your doctors will ignore your problems and your concerns. They will encourage you to take the hormones regardless of any side effects and will never, ever once tell you to stop. They never told me to stop when I gained a heap of weight, or had constant bloating, or suddenly developed food intolerances, and my mental health and my home life was deteriorating. How is that ethical treatment? And none of those side effects are mentioned anywhere. So how could I have ever given informed consent when it was unknown that I would ever have such reactions? They will not offer you tailored options. They will not take other factors of your life into account. They will not take a holistic approach to help you sort through your underlying mental health issues. They will not offer you natural remedies for your gender dysphoria. They will instead push you onto the trans medical conveyor belt, regardless of who you are. And all of this is because they're afraid of a lawsuit, even though that's exactly what they will all get now. The power dynamic has been thrown out the window. The doctors that are supposed to be the ones to educate their patients and guide them to make decisions that are appropriate and beneficial and ethical, that's no more. Instead, they have become little more than hairdressers. Hairdressers who feel they are being held at gunpoint. But the thing is, most transgender people are young and poor. They don't have the means to sue. It tends to be the adult men who wage lawsuits based on gatekeeping and discrimination in spas and toilets and that sort of thing. Most of us are, or were, naive children looking to adults for guidance. If I'd been told to slow down, spend a couple of years socially transitioned and explore all my underlying issues, I wouldn't have been in this mess to begin with. The trans community can lie and bury all these problems as much as they like, but the truth is, the current medical system is broken. It's hurting everyone, whether they be true trans or not. These hormones cause serious, lifelong health problems. The surgeries are even worse. I've seen an almost endless, ghoulish parade of mutilated bodies, real botched surgeries. Mastectomies are conducted on women suffering breast cancer all the time, right? Yet the ones performed on trans-identified women are messy and slapdash. Get a load of this one. Holy fuck, how is that acceptable? And that's to say nothing of the absolute nightmare of genital surgeries. They take flesh from your arm to make an imitation of a penis, or take a piece of your colon and try to create something that's supposed to resemble a vagina. This is all sunk cost fallacy coming from a group of mentally unstable people. And that's just honestly what it is. Gender dysphoria is usually the result of some kind of underlying trauma or mental illness. These people are fixated on transitioning, and once they get it, and it causes them harm, inevitably, they ignore it. They double down and claim everything is great. I should know, I was one of them. Thankfully, I never underwent surgery. It's still got them. They're barely there, but they are still there. But testosterone ruined my life. I've mostly bounced back. Surgery, however, is permanent. There's no coming back from that. And that's where the sunk cost fallacy comes in. That's where the lies about amazing post-op sex comes from. That's why the incontinence or bad smells or necrotic flesh or infections or repeated corrective surgeries are buried. The trans community does not want you to know that. So no, I am not transphobic. I am not a gatekeeper. I am asking any transgender person out there to step up and ask more from the medical system. Because what you're receiving now is absolutely unacceptable. This is barbaric. You deserve better. Why not start fighting for that? See you, Space Cowboy.